empowered people make informed decisions that lead to living a life without regret. This is Sarah Kaki and Shawna Woods from Atlanta Divorce Law Group, and this is the Happily Ever After Divorce Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Happily Ever After Divorce Podcast. I am Sarah Kaki with the Atlanta Divorce Law Group, joined by our managing partner, Shawna Woods. Shawna, welcome.
Hi, Sarah.
All right, Shawna, this time we're going to get quite personal with you and your story. We've shared your story before as a single mom and everything you've achieved having a child so early. Today, we're going to talk about something else in your life experience, and that's your religion as a child, the religion you were born to and raised in, and how you navigated through that. And we're going to sort of use that as a platform to talk about how we bring religion to our children and what that means, and hopefully give a life story that could give parents out there something to think about.
All right, let's do it.
All right. So, Shawna, you were raised in the Jehovah's Witness religion, correct?
Yes. So I was raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and my mom became one of Jehovah's Witnesses when she was pregnant with me.
Okay.
So it's the only religion that I was raised in. It was not a family religion. So it was my mom who became a witness. She was already married to my dad, who did not become a witness until many years later.
Okay.
So when I was 11, he also became a witness. Now, I want to be very clear. I left the religion when I was 15.
Okay.
So this is not a religion that I hold on to.
Right.
These are not beliefs I currently hold.
So I actually did not know what a Jehovah's Witness religion was till I moved to America in 96 and found out about it in 97. I had a friend that was a Jehovah's Witness in 8th grade. For those of us or those who they haven't heard of it before, can you give us like a high level understanding of what is this religion?
Absolutely. So it is, although a lot of people claim it's not Christian, people outside the religion, It is based on a Christian sect.
Okay.
And it was actually created like in the 20s or 30s. Okay. So it's a newer religion as far as religions go. And it's based on the King James Version of the Bible. But Jehovah's Witnesses do not believe in hell at all, right? There, in the afterlife, there is no going to hell.
Okay.
Although they do believe in Satan, they do believe in Jesus, and they believe in who they call Jehovah, right? Jehovah is God. The religion is very, very centered on what they believe are the actual words in the Bible. So a lot of times when people think about witnesses, one is they're the people who go out and preach to you, right? They knock on your door or they're standing on the street corner. It's because one of the scriptures, Matthew 24:14, that dictates that the witnesses preach to everyone, okay? They also believe in what I will say, a truncated version of heaven, okay? They believe that when the end times come, Armageddon's going to happen on earth, right? Everyone but the witnesses are going to die.
Oh, wow.
Sorry, y'all. Doesn't matter if you believe in any other type of Christianity. Only the witnesses survive,
Okay.
right? Now, they do believe that 144,000 people will be angels in heaven.
Okay.
Okay. So it's when you grow up in this religion, you have this idea that you're going to live forever, right? On earth in a paradise. So long as you obey this, obey what they're preaching to you is what the scriptures say, right? But going back to, one of the things that you really look at is not only are those the people who are, preaching to you, there are no holidays celebrated, right?
I remember this part about my friend in 8th grade.
Yeah, that was a big one. No birthdays are celebrated because the only birthday that was mentioned in the Bible was from an evil king.
Okay.
Right. So can't celebrate birthdays. They trace all the other holidays back to pagan origins.
Okay.
Right. So you can't celebrate those because they have pagan origins.
Okay.
The only one they celebrate, and I kind of put that in quotations, is Passover. Right. Not Easter, but Passover. And it's not a celebration like everyone gets together and, throws a party or exchanges presents. It's a very religious ceremony. And if you are of what they call the anointed, the chosen 144,000 are going to heaven, you take a sip of wine as they pass around this wine. So that's the biggest celebration in as far as the witnesses are concerned. So you grow up I really think it's a depravity, in my personal opinion, and this is I'm only speaking from my personal opinion, a depravity of a religious culture. It's almost like they stole part of what makes some spirituality really wonderful and welcoming is the celebrations, right?
Yeah.
Is the traditions that you have around certain things. The witnesses, in my opinion, it was bereft. You didn't have any of that, right? It was always focused on what your afterlife was going to be, right? And the worst thing that you could be to the witnesses was worldly, right? They did not want you to be worldly. You had to be of God. And in growing up in the time period that I did, it was very misogynistic as well. And it was also very much you did not associate. You were not allowed to associate, even if they were family members, blood family members, you are not allowed to associate outside the witnesses. So your group was this big, right? And I'm holding my hands very small. Podcast, it works really well. But your group was very small and insular. And so, I think that's part of what made the religion thrive in certain aspects, right? Kept to themselves. Now, one thing I will say about the witnesses, and I try very hard to look for the silver in a lot of the linings, is that the witnesses were very much teaching that race did not matter, right? They were very much welcoming of all races, inclusive of all cultures, all you couldn't be any other religion. If you're any other religion, you were out, but it didn't matter otherwise what you were. So I grew up in a very diverse congregation as far as our racial makeup, right? But I also grew up very isolated, even from my own family members.
Family members that were not Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, there were no other family members that were Jehovah's Witnesses.
So tell me how, when you were born, obviously there was never a choice of, hey, sweet little Shawna, mommy's a Jehovah's Witness, and you get to choose to be this or not. It was, this is your religion.
So they don't get baptized when you're a child. Okay, you do have to get baptized when you're older. Most witnesses, when they're raised, usually it's like a 12, 13. It's a choice that you have to go through these studies to become a witness. But you are raised this way. This is what you are fed to believe. Okay. Right? So yes, I swallowed the Kool-Aid. This is what I believe.
And I mean, I've even heard you tell me stories before where you, as a witness, it was your obligation to go door to door.
Absolutely.
Tell me about your age and how old you were doing that.
Oh gosh. Well, I'm sure my mom took me when she was going door to door, probably in a stroller. But I distinctly remember the first time I knocked on someone's doors, and you went and knocked on people's doors back then. I was 5. Right. And I was holding a watchtower and an awake, and I was going to tell them, I had a speech prepared, and we practiced these things. And the religion is really all of your life. It's all encompassing. It's not just what they call church on Sunday. We didn't call it church. It was Kingdom Hall. You were going to meetings at the Kingdom Hall. So it was your Sunday, Tuesday, you had a small group meeting. Thursday was another larger group meeting. In between Thursday and Tuesday, you needed to have your family study and your personal study. And then Saturday mornings, you were knocking on doors.
When did you start questioning this? Because I'm sure at the age of 5, you're just going with the roll. You're rolling with the punches. But at what age did you start questioning? Because by the age 15, you got yourself out of it.
Yeah.
What is your first memory where you were like, this isn't right, or this isn't for me?
That one's hard. It is. It's hard. And because you have to remember, I believed, like, you could not tell me that there was not going to be an Armageddon before the year 2000. And that was one of the big ones too. You could not tell me that the world wasn't going to be destroyed and I wasn't going to live forever. That was not, that I was hands down. Ingrained. It was ingrained. And there was something going on, without getting too much into there was something going on that because of the insular way that the religion was, very much prevalent that abuse happened.
Yeah.
Physical abuse, other types of abuse.
And they didn't protect you.
You weren't even allowed to speak about it, especially women.
Yeah.
When they preach from the stage, is what they call it, that if you don't fight to the death, if someone's trying to rape you, you're just as guilty. If you have something going on, you're not speaking up. You see sisters in the congregation saying, I have to leave this man because he's beating me. And they say, you can't leave him. Beating you is not one of the reasons you can leave a man.
Wow.
You're not speaking up. But because I was what they call a pioneer, and let me explain that for a second. A pioneer, you have the regular and you have the auxiliary, and that's how many hours did you spend in service? And you can do 60 or 90. And in my little head, if I was a pioneer, then these things that were going on were not going to go on again because Jehovah God was going to protect me.
Wow.
Okay, Jehovah God was going to protect me personally. But because of also the things that were being taught to me, I remember distinctly, and I remember distinctly repeating this one particular prayer. Jehovah, make me stronger so this doesn't happen anymore.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember praying and praying and praying that prayer. And nothing happened.
Nothing changed.
Nothing changed. And that's a catch-22 because I did stop what was going on. I made it stop. And that was the first break because in that religion, they would have said, if I had said that to anybody, they said, well, you got what you asked for. He made you stronger, right? Even somewhere in my little head at 12 years old, I was like, yeah, but you should have sent somebody.
Yeah.
I should not I should not have had to step up and do that. So that was like the first break. And then there was just little chinks in the armor after that where like, this is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. And at 15, I still was very much followed what we would call the righteous path. Christians are very straight-laced little girl, right? Very much, was modest, was not worldly, as they say. And I met another lady in high school at that time who was of faith, but followed kind of like the same kind of ideas. We got to celebrate the holidays, but it was the same kind of ideas. And that was the moment where I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that I'm saying this girl who I love and I'm friends with, and her name was Gail, by the way, and I really loved her, that she was going to die and I was going to live because I believed one way and she believed another.
Yeah.
And so that was the end of it. That's when I pulled the plug. Now, I'm not going to say that I still didn't have some thoughts that, oh gosh, am I doing this? Am I going to die now?
Of course, the
right?
doubt.
It took me until I was probably 19 or 20 to really recognize that it was done. But I left at 15.
So now, going back and looking through all this, how do you feel about parents putting their kids through their religion? And I understand at some point, if you are a family of a Christian faith or Islamic faith or Jewish faith, part of the family values is this religion, and we stick together and we grow as a family within this religion. Do you believe there's ever an age where it's appropriate to tell the child, hey, you can make a choice here? Or do you think that as children, we'll grow up ourselves and make that choice anyway? What do you think a parent's role should be, given what I would say trauma, the traumatic experience you had of putting your whole heart into a religion and not being properly protected by the religion and its organization? What is your feelings towards a parent giving their child their religion?
Yeah, I went in the opposite direction with my daughter.
Yeah.
I very much did not want to indoctrinate her into any particular religion. And I read her all kinds of books. Hopi, the alchemist. I would talk to her about Buddhism. I would talk to her about all these different religions and kind of let her grow and peg. It had its downsides and its upsides, right? so it's hard to say this is going to be right for your family or that's not going to be right for your family, because I do think there's a lot of people out there who have beautiful faith.
Yeah.
What I think is really important is not to get so lost in the indoctrination and so lost in what someone is telling you, this is the interpretation of this book, or even what you think this means, that you lose sight of the child.
Right.
Right? That you lose sight of what this person is, right? To be able to step back and say, I can have faith, but I'm still going to have some common sense here, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still going to say, this doesn't make sense in this world. I think it's really important. Like, and don't get me wrong, I think Catholicism is a beautiful religion. It can be. Of course, it's been, wrecked with its own problems, Anytime you have someone you give utter faith to in a human being, they can destroy that faith. In knowing that, I think it's really important if your child comes to you and says, I don't believe this, for you to be accepting of that, right? Because when I said I was leaving my religion, I distinctly remember my mom looked at me and she said, you're dead to me, right?
Mm.
And I know what she was trying to say. She was trying to say, you're not going to be there, because
after the apocalypse.
Yeah, after the apocalypse, you're not going to be there. But still, you're a child, and hearing that. So I think it's really important to allow your children to find their own way in their own faith.
I also hear you saying, and again, I don't know if this is right for all families, but we're sticking to the lessons from Shawna's life, is the child feeling they have a relationship with the parent outside of the religion.
Yes.
Because it sounded like what your experience was, getting love and connection to your mom through being a witness. And that cord was cut off.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It wasn't just the love and connection because my dad did join when I was 11, but it was also that because they cut you off, that religion in particular, and not all of religions do this, but you have to be very wary of religions that do. Mm-hmm. They cut you off from everyone else, right?
Yeah.
So they
create a very dependent situation.
And you don't have a relationship with anyone outside the religion, right? Your whole identity, your whole self-worth is tied to how well am I doing in this religion?
Yeah.
And that is devastating.
Right.
To a child who then has to kind of discover who they are.
So in our cases, Shawna, when we see this very often, when after divorce, a parent is practicing one religion and the other parent's not involved in it, or sometimes they're in the same religion, but the parents selected a church that is on a different spectrum than what the other parent is comfortable with.
Yeah.
And just to kind of bring everybody to the table on parenting plans, one of the big parts of a parenting plan are some decision-making rights over the child. And the right to make a decision over the child's religion is on the table. It's one of the 5 major decision-making rights.
Yeah.
And we find it often that the parent that has custody over the child perhaps also has a right to make a decision on religion. And it's usually the parent that cares very specific about religion and is very specific about the church they want the child to go to and kind of practice that they get is the one that cares more about religion. Usually the more smorgasbord of religion type parent, right? That's sort of like, well, as long as my child has a relationship with God, or, I don't care that much about my religion myself, so I'll let the other spouse decide. This is where I think things get a little bit troublesome for down the line. They say, I don't really care about the right to religion. She's a witness, or she's a devout Catholic, or something that shows that the other parent has a much stronger feeling towards this. Let her have that. Instead, I want to fight for the right for medical decision making, for instance, right? Because we negotiate these 5 different rights over the child and sometimes give one up in order to have an upper hand in the other one. Right. And then that parent starts taking the child to a specific church, and the child comes back and starts reiterating the things they're hearing in the church or in the temple or wherever the place of worship is. And it starts freaking out the parent that's not as religious. Help me navigate through that? And what's the advice we're giving parents in that situation?
Well, I think it's really important to know that final decision-making power comes with the term of joint legal custody.
Mm-hmm.
And joint legal custody means that the parents are supposed to be talking to each other about all these major life decisions before they willy-nilly make that decision for the child, right? So that's one of the aspects that we're going to take a look at. The other one is religion or medical, right? Let's take those two big ones. If you are making poor decisions for your child, and just because you go to a certain religion that the other parent doesn't like doesn't mean that's a poor decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not bashing all religions. Please don't
Of course not, yeah.
think that, because I really do respect everyone's faith. I think that when you are making decisions that vastly change what that child has been raised with,
Mm-hmm.
or does some kind of indoctrination that can be very detrimental to the child, and we've had these cases, we
Absolutely.
have a couple of them going on right now, that you do have the right to go back and say, I need a modification of this final decision-making power because this is detrimental to my child, right? And it's a fine line to walk,
Yeah.
right? Because you don't want to be insulting someone's faith and religion. It's never something I want to do. But at the same time, you get to a line where you say, this is outside the norm,
Mm-hmm.
and this doesn't feel good, and we need to do something about it.
Tell me about your daughter, Sarah. How does she feel about the fact that she got this open discussion about, hey, you choose your religion and I'm here to support you?
From the conversations that we have, I think that she feels very much empowered to feel what she feels about religion and to make her own decisions. Now, I will tell you, it's funny because there were certain people when I was growing up who would try to pull my daughter aside and take her to this one church or this
Mm-hmm.
other church.
Mm-hmm.
And she would get mad and she would come back and say, well, you know what they said about single moms? Let me tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny because she was very already, and I'm talking about a young age,
Mm-hmm.
like 9, right? She was already so aware of herself and aware of her own ability to make these decisions that even though they were taking to her a place where everybody is saying, oh no, that we believe exactly what they were saying, she felt empowered to say,
Yeah.
I don't believe that.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it did give her a good viewpoint of what she wants for herself.
I ask you about how Sarah felt about it because my parents raised me the way you raised Sarah,
Yeah.
right? Like they came from religious persecution under the Islamic Republic. And it's interesting because when you think of religious persecution, you think that means somebody had a religion that they weren't able to practice.
Right.
And no, my parents actually, before the revolution, considered themselves Muslim. But when the revolution came, the practice became so extreme that they felt they were on a whole different spectrum level of the religion. So it gave them such a distaste for organized religion that when we left Iran, they did not raise us as Muslims.
Yeah.
And if anything, my dad would teach us about all the religions. And growing up in Sweden, there's no separation of church and state. So we went to church and we sang for Christmas and we, did all this Christian stuff. And, at the age of 9, I was very interested in Buddhism, thought it was amazing. My dad didn't know any other religion than Islam. So when he was teaching me like religious fables, it was a lot of stories about Muhammad, even though he wasn't preaching it from you are a Muslim, an organized religion way, more of this is what your relationship with God should look like. And this is a role model, or Jesus was a role model, more
Mm-hmm.
from that perspective. But I'll tell you, at the same age where you sort of rebelled against Jehovah's Witness was around the same age for me when I rebelled against my parents' very nonchalant view towards religion of, this is your own path. We're not going to dictate it for you. And at 14, I decided I wanted to be a Muslim. And I wanted to practice it. And I was very upset with my parents. I was very upset for a while. I would say next 7 years spent angry of, you guys did not give me direction. You did not give me a proper organized foundation. And look at these families that get to go to church on Sunday together. Look at these families that get to fast together at the mosque. We don't have that. We don't have that ceremonial connection. So I feel like as parents, if you've had any sort of extreme experience and you're trying to give your child an anecdote, you're good luck. right? Good luck. And I think at the end of the day, what we've tried to do at home with our children is create a very strong relationship with God for them. And have an organized way as a family to talk about God so that they're still feeling. Because I think a lot of children like structure.
Yes.
That's the problem. And I felt if I now as a, older adult, I can look back at it and say, you weren't mad that they didn't give you religion. You were mad they didn't give organized structure around this relationship with God. So that's what the anecdote we're trying to bring to our children now, where we have Sunday meetings at home. It's sort of, we call it our khaki family meeting, but it's really our family church. Yeah. And Sham and I come in prepared with these conversations about spirituality, about, during Easter, we talked about Jesus and the resurrection. During Ramadan, we talk about, Muhammad. And every Sunday, we have an organized conversation that we speak about in sort of our own non-denominational way. And I think at the end of the day, that if you can provide that at a minimum, that's sort of been what my experience has been.
And I really love that. I love that you're introducing them. I feel like if I could say anything, there's two things that I felt that I did not do well, for my daughter. Is one, I didn't provide a community for her, right? And I do think so many religions can provide a community for people. So I do feel that was lacking. But I like the idea of, okay, here's some choices for you. We're going to talk about them on a regular basis. And we also didn't do that, right? And she was kind of at a loss of understanding the Christian faith because that was the one I didn't teach her, right? That was the one we're shying away from that one. So I do think that's important. And I love the way you're just kind of enlightening your children. Are they drawn now to religion?
Well, yes. Hannah, our 6-year-old, she's claimed Christianity. Okay. And our 9-year-old has selected Islam. And if I had to recommend a book, it's not going to be a book of like, here's what to do, but it's a book to kind of understand this complex relationship with religion and God and a child. It's the book called Life of Pi by Jan Martel. Great. It is so good. A movie came out on it. Movie does not even come close to the book.
The book is amazing.
The book is amazing. And it really talks about the view of a child looking at this relationship with God and these religions. And it's phenomenal. So unless you have anything further to prescribe.
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Thank you, Shawna.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks for listening to the Happily Ever After Divorce podcast. If you'd like to learn more, go to atlantadivorcelawgroup.com/resources.